Hey guys, welcome to Priceless B Movies. I'm your host, Colin Price, and for the better part of the last year and a half, 2 years or so, I've spent a lot of time making videos, doing reviews for newer films as they come out. And I love doing that, it's fine, but ultimately it's not really what I created this page for to begin with. I really want to get back to doing more reviews, more videos for older films, films that have kind of slipped under the radar, films that aren't talked about as much as I think they should be today. And so I'm going to try something new. And if it catches on, awesome. But I'm going to do my regular review videos for older films, but every so often, every couple of months or so, I'm going to do a video like this where I kind of give my shorter, briefer opinions on some newer films and kind of doing like a roundup. Okay, here's 5 or 6 movies I've seen in the last few months that are new, and here's my kind of basic general thoughts on them so that I can kind of have the best of both worlds here. And also at the end of the year, when I start doing like my top 10 movies of the year, I can say that at some point I did actually talk about some of these, unlike last year where I had my top 10 list, and I don't think anything on that top 10 list actually had a full review. With that in mind, let's get started. The Rule of Jenny Penn. The Rule of Jenny Penn stars Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow. This one was really heavily promoted last fall and winter, and I remember seeing the trailer for it and thinking, oh my gosh, this looks great. I love both of these two actors and have for many, many, many years. And to have them finally on screen together, I mean, I would not have thought that this is the kind of film I would see them together in, but oh my gosh, the promise, the potential of this was just too good. I mean, if these two guys are headlining your movie, I almost don't really care what it's about. Just put it in front of me and I'll watch it. And then when Stephen King, raved about it, I thought, all right. I mean, he tends to rave about a lot of movies that I don't think are that great, but it's still Stephen King, so it made me excited. In the film, Geoffrey Rush plays a very no-nonsense judge who suffers a stroke and has to be put in an assisted living facility, and he does not take to it very well. I mean, Rush's character, he doesn't suffer fools. He does not put up with very much. There are characters who try to befriend him, who live in this home, and he just kind of snubs his nose at them, and then, or thumbs his nose at them, sorry. And then you get John Lithgow's character, who at first seems like he's just got dementia, he's not all there, but then you find out that no, he's much more stable than he pretends to be, and at night when, the staff and orderlies, they're not really around as much, he kind of goes around this nursing home kind of terrorizing and bullying all the residents. This is very much, and I know I'm not the first person to make this comparison, this is very much kind of like Misery meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't think this is as good as either of those two movies, but if that concept intrigues you, I would definitely say to check this one out. I don't like the last act of this. The first two acts, when we're meeting these characters and we're seeing kind of how horrible their lives are. I mean, when you live in one of these facilities, when I was in high school, I volunteered at a nursing home here in Champaign, and I can tell you it was one of the most depressing things that I've experienced in my life, to see these people who are kind of abandoned, have their backs, their family kind of turns their backs on them, and, to see how sad it can be. I really felt that. I thought this movie captured that very well, that feeling of loneliness and that longing to have your youth back, to have more control over your body, over your mind. And some of the things that John Lithgow does to these people, I'm not going to get into it for spoilers' sake, but they're pretty horrific. And there were times where I definitely thought, oh my gosh, like this is, someone really needs to stop this guy. But then at the same time, there were points where okay, for example, you have a scene where they're all dancing, all the residents are having like a dance, and he kind of like struts in and he's stepping on people's feet and he's shoving people out of the way, and he's doing, basically bullying his way through the floor until he's the only person dancing on the floor. And I'm looking at this scene, and there's a nurse over here, an orderly over here, a guard over here, and they're all watching him do this. And I'm like, at what point do you do you know how to do your jobs? At what point is it plausible deniability to wonder like why they're just kind of letting this guy treat everyone like this? And you have to wonder too, like, if that's so normal that they just don't do anything about it, then why are they surprised when Jeffrey Rush comes in later and is like, hey, this guy's a menace. He's, treating us all horribly and doing the... So, I mean, I wasn't really able to buy... By the time I got to the final act, I wasn't really able to buy into it anymore. But I do still marginally recommend the picture. I'm going to give The Rule of Jenny Penn 2.5 stars. This could have been a lot better, but the performances of Jeffrey Rush and John Lithgow do really elevate it above kind of the problems that I had with the story. The Woman in the Yard. This one, I think, got a lot of people's attention around the same time that the trailers for The Rule of Jenny Penn started hitting, because the concept, once again, like Rule of Jenny Penn, is pretty interesting. Okay, so you have this single mother and her 2 kids who live out in this like farmhouse, and one day they wake up and they look out the window and there's this dark cloaked woman just sitting in a chair in their lawn, and just gradually over the course of the next hour or so, this woman is kind of moving closer and closer and closer to the house. You almost don't need more than that. You almost don't need a trailer to show more than that. That image of this lady, just sitting in the grass, in this chair in the grass, that's almost haunting enough. The problem that you get with movies like this is that when you get to the explanation of who this character is and what they're doing there and what they want, at this point, as an audience member, especially if you watch the trailer and you're looking forward to seeing this, no matter what the explanation is for this character and why they're there, it's almost guaranteed to be a disappointment, because you've probably created something in your head, in your imagination, that's far more interesting or far more sinister than what's actually happening. As I often say, for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I'm not going to tell you who this woman is or why she's here. I will say that the reveal and kind of the last 5 or 10 minutes of this movie really pissed me off. When you get to kind of the meat and potatoes of the plot and you get to the reveal, the place that they go with it and kind of, oh gosh, how to talk about this without ruining the surprise. There's something going on with the mom. She's going through something. And I reached a point a couple of years ago where I became really, really sick of horror movies using grief and trauma as metaphors for whatever the evil thing is that they're encountering, the ghost, the spirit, the witch, the demon, whatever it is. And this movie is probably the prime example of why that pisses me off. As it happens, I probably would have liked any other explanation for what the woman in the yard is and why she's there than what the film gives us. And I was borderline, and I don't say this lightly, I was borderline offended by the message that the ending of this movie seems to put out. I really wish I could go into more of it, but like I said, spoilers. So it's hard for me to really articulate what I'm talking about. But I'll say that there's a decision that a character has to make at the end of this film, a choice that they have to make. And the choice that they end up making, the option they end up going with, and how the movie kind of champions it as it's great that they made this choice because now it's better for these characters over here. I really hated that. I really hated that. The Woman in the Yard is probably my least favorite movie I've seen this year. Woman in the Yard gets 1.5 stars, and really I'm only being that nice simply because the movie is shot very well, and especially once you get to a point where the woman is no longer in the yard and she's actually in the home kind of terrorizing the family. I don't think that's a spoiler because we could all kind of assume that that's going to happen at some point. The trailer even shows a little bit of that. But some of the spookier stuff in the last like half hour or 20 minutes or so was done very well. They play with lighting and shadows and things like in a way that I thought was very interesting. So I'll give it 1.5 stars for that. But I really don't recommend this film. I think that this movie... It could not have possibly rubbed me in a worse way. Superman. So Superman is James Gunn's attempt to kind of reboot and relaunch the DC Cinematic Universe. And When I saw the first trailer, where Superman crash lands and then Krypto comes in and has to save him, I thought, okay, just this scene, I think, having seen the movie, just that scene really captures the tone of this movie. There are moments of devastation and danger, and they're kind of undercut by humor, but not to the extent that you would see with, like, some of the Marvel films, like the later Thor movies, right? Where it's like every serious moment is then completely undone by a joke. I don't think that Superman has that problem. When I was a kid, Superman and Batman were the go-tos. Marvel really didn't have good movies in the 90s until, like, Blade. It was 1998. That's the movie that really got Marvel started to become what it is now. And until that point, Marvel movies, we had the Captain America movie that Albert Pujols did, and we had some really bad 70s like Spider-Man and the notorious Fantastic Four from 1994 that, now you can actually get on YouTube, but for the longest time you couldn't find it because it was shelved. So really, DC was your only option. It was either that it was like Batman and Superman, or it was something like The Shadow, The Rocketeer, The Phantom, the string of, pretty good but pretty campy movies from the 90s that never really went anywhere. And Christopher Reeve was Superman. Nothing against Henry Cavill. I like those movies, but those are kind of on a different wavelength. I really did always enjoy Christopher Reeve as Superman, at least the first two, Superman and Superman 2, the Richard Donner ones. And I am very happy to say that this new movie blew me away because it really made me feel like a kid again watching those Christopher Reeve movies. I don't even really think that it's just because they use the John Williams score, and they do pretty liberally. Throughout the film, but also David Cornswell's portrayal of Clark Kent and Superman, it really reminded me of Christopher Reeve in all the best ways. He's really captured that Midwestern boy next door. He's got these moments where he should be really mad, but he's walking around, especially when Krypto the dog is annoying him, and he's like, "Oh gosh, darn it, dog! What are you doing? What the hey?" Just this really crisp, like a Boy Scout that Superman always kind of was. But the person who amazed me in this film even more was Nicholas Hoult playing Lex Luthor. I think this is my favorite Lex Luthor. I love Gene Hackman, of course, all respect to the master. And even Kevin Spacey, did a pretty good job in Superman Returns. Michael Rosenbaum was probably the gold standard up until this point, but I think Nicholas Hoult has outdone him. I think that Nicholas Hoult is my favorite Lex Luthor on film now. We don't talk about Jesse Eisenberg. We just don't. That never happened. And really what they do with his character in this and how they update him, he's kind of this Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs kind of character. And I thought that was a really interesting place to take the character, but he's also so petty. He even admits at one point of the film that he knows that everything he does is rooted in envy because he's such a small man with so much at his disposal. And I really liked that take on the character. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, she's okay. I wish they'd done more with her. One of the very, very, very few weaknesses I think this movie has is that in engaging with some other supporting characters like the Justice Gang, I think that there isn't enough time with Clark Kent and Lois Lane together to really appreciate their relationship. I hope in future movies that the two of them have more of an opportunity to kind of play off of each other. They just have very little screen time together in this film. I hope that that's remedied in the future. Also, I know that when this movie came out, there was all this political backlash, which I really don't understand. People saying like, "Oh, well, this is supposed to be, this is supposed to be representing or being a metaphor for this war or this thing." Like, guys, the screenplay for this was written like 4 years ago. I'm not sure where you guys are getting this from. Frankly, comic book movies in the last 20 years, whenever they become political, whether it's the Winter Soldier, there's always some way that if you want to twist that into like, oh, this person's supposed to be this president in real life or this senator in real life or whatever. If you try hard enough, you can do that with any movie. I don't think that something that was written almost half a decade ago is trying really hard to poke fun at something that's only been happening for the last year and a half. But I I hope that people can look past things like this and give this movie a chance because it's really good. Also, one other thing that I'll say that's going to sound like a negative, it didn't bother me as much as I know it bothered some other people, so much as it's something that, like, okay, I'm fine with it in this film because of plot reasons, but I hope in the future, when they do more of these movies, that Metropolis is a little safer. I kind of get it in this one because, like, they kind of set it up at the beginning that in the first scene of the movie, Superman is losing a battle for the first time. That's got to be big news to different monsters, aliens, yada yada. And so I kind of forgive the fact that Metropolis seems to be being attacked by some new monster alien or something like every day over the course of this movie, because I could kind of understand, like, well, if they think that Superman can be beaten, now different various aliens and bad guys might be trying harder. I kind of accept that. I hope that that's not like a cheap running joke throughout these movies, though. I was fine with it in this one. I might have a problem with it in the future if it keeps going that direction. Overall, though, I'm going to give Superman 4 stars. I really liked this movie, guys. This is going to make, like, my top 5 of the year. The issues I have with it are so minimal, or issues that I think, like, could potentially be fixed in later films, so that just doesn't bother me. But man, I just wish more people would give this one a chance. And, you know, in hindsight, I will admit I do still have yet to see the Fantastic Four. I would have put that on this list. I just have not seen it yet. So we'll see what my thoughts are about that. Maybe I'll put that in the next video like this that I do. Him. Him is a Jordan Peele produced, not directed, remember that, horror film that combines the sports genres with horror. And I was kind of intrigued by that at a very basic level because I haven't seen that. I right now I'd have trouble thinking of another movie that blended sports movie cliches with horror elements. I'll say that the trailer didn't really wow me, but I still gave this one a shot, and this is such a disappointment. Him is about a professional football player who's trying to rise up the ranks and be the GOAT, you know, the greatest of all time. And he suffers a head injury at the beginning of the movie. And, of course, head injuries in football, that's not a joke. I mean, this could be a career-ending injury for him. And he's not quite sure what he's going to do. He's emotionally devastated by this, obviously. But then another player, an older, more seasoned player played by Marlon Wayans, kind of reaches out to him and says, well, hey, why don't you come to my private compound and practice and train with me, and I'll give you some tips, and I'll help you get through this funk, and we're going to condition you and make you the best player of all time. And so this player, obviously, I mean, he's looked up to Marlon Wayans' character. Marlon Wayans is kind of like the Tom Brady of this film, in this universe, and he's looked up to him for his whole life, so he's blown away by this. He doesn't think about it for even a second. Like, of course I'll go to your mysterious compound, you know, and train with you and these other... Guys, if I really have to explain to you where this is going, if you saw the trailer for this movie, I guarantee you've already figured out the big reveal at the end of this film. This is the most obvious Faustian film, and typically I love movies with Faustian bargains, you know, kind of like the deal with the devil kind of concept. But this has to be the most obvious setup for something like that I've ever seen. And it's really infuriating because... when you get to the end of the first act, which it culminates with this one really good scene where Marlon Wayans is kind of training him, and he's got this other guy positioned in front of one of those machines that you fire a football through, and every time that the main character, you know, doesn't throw the ball right or doesn't do whatever, Marlon Wayans turns this machine on and shoots this guy directly in the face with a football as a punishment. It may sound kind of silly, but trust me, it's the one really tense and really well done scene in the film. But after that, you get into the second act, it gets really muddied. Like, it feels like it's building towards something that is grander and more inventive than what you eventually get. And I think that's the biggest letdown of the story, is that I almost feel like something just got lost in translation. Maybe this was originally supposed to be like an hour longer or something, and there was supposed to be so much more to it, and then the studio just tore it to shreds. I have to question why someone like Jordan Peele would have had this project put in front of him and thought, this is it. This is something I want to put my money to, because I feel like he's smarter than that. So I can only assume that there was originally more to this. I really hope that's the case, because otherwise Jordan Peele's going to start losing his name and the quality of his name, at least in my opinion, about as fast as M. Night Shyamalan did. Marlon Wayans is very good in his role, though, and some of the shots are kind of impressive. And I will say that when it got to the ending, though I didn't like how simplistic the ending was, I did like some of the carnage that results in the last few minutes of this movie. For those reasons alone, I'm going to give him 2 out of 4 stars. We'll give it 2 stars. I'm feeling generous. Up next is The Naked Gun. I love the Naked Gun movies, the original trilogy with Leslie Nielsen. Even the show that they were based off of, even though there were only a few episodes of it, The Police Squad. I do really feel like those 3 movies, even the third one, which is not as good, but even that one holds up as a pretty great spoof film. And like a lot of people, I was kind of apprehensive when I was like, oh, they're making another Naked Gun. Like, why? Why would you do that? Just leave it alone. And then I heard that Liam Neeson was going to play the main character, and I thought, oh, never mind. Okay, I'm willing to give this a shot. Because Liam Neeson, I mean, he does have this kind of deadpan way of approaching comedy and humor in films. And, Leslie Nielsen was the same way. A lot of people gave Liam Neeson crap when they heard he was going to be, the guy in the new Naked Gun. And they were saying, well, he's not a comedian. He's not a comedian like Leslie Nielsen was. Why are they putting Liam Neeson in this? And it's like, well, Leslie Nielsen was a serious dramatic actor for decades before he ever did comedy. The Naked Gun was just right up there with Airplane, like him kind of dabbling in comedy, and then they discovered, oh no, he's really good. Well, the reason he was really good at it is because no matter how ridiculous everything got around him, he played it straight. And I thought, well, Liam Neeson can definitely do that. He's gonna nail this. And Liam Neeson is really good in this new Naked Gun. It's just a shame that next to nothing else is. I'll give credit to the first half hour of the movie. There are some great gags in here. One involving an automobile accident where they have to drag the car from a lake, and then they use a giant claw machine like you'd see in an old pizza restaurant or something to pull the car out. That was pretty funny. And there's a bit where there's a bit in an interrogation room where they review body cam footage that had me holding my sides. That was pretty good. But a lot of the jokes in this are just repeated over and over and over and over again. Like that joke where someone says something and then another person just kind of twists the words to make it a pun on something else. And that happens so many times. You can literally see them coming. You can literally say the line yourself in the theater before the character does, because it's that obvious what they're going for. Also, there's a joke where every time the cops enter a room or do something, someone off screen hands them a cup of coffee. That's pretty funny the first 5 or 6 times. When you get to the 15th time that happens, it's like, is this all you've got? At least the original Naked Gun movies, they kind of kept it fresh. They kept hitting you with jokes. And the jokes in this, just for the most part, aren't that great. And I hate to say this, because I was supporting Liam Neeson in this. Their names are remarkably similar. And I wanted this to be so much better than it was. Pamela Anderson is the love interest, and she's fine, I guess, but she's not really doing too much that I would expect her to be able or not be able to do. For as many people who are saying, "Oh my gosh, Pamela Anderson is so funny in this movie," it was like, well, okay, I'm glad you thought so. And also, Danny Houston is the bad guy, and this is a cardinal sin if you're doing a Naked Gun movie. Other than Ricardo Montalban in the first film, a lot of people knew him as Khan from Star Trek, but a lot of people also knew him from Fantasy Island. And then you had Robert Goulet as the villain of the second film, and Fred Ward as the villain of the third film. And it was kind of this running joke that they would cast actors who aren't traditionally seen as villains as the villains of these films. But for this one, you got Danny Houston. When was the last time Danny Houston didn't play a smug bad guy? No, go ahead, I'll wait. So that was really disappointing. This film could have been so much better. For the gags that did land, I'll give The Naked Gun 2 stars. Next on the list, don't worry, I've only got a couple more. I know this video is already getting to be a little longer than I had planned. But we've got Good Boy. Good Boy is a supernatural horror film. It's basically a haunted house movie, but it all unfolds from the perspective of a dog. So this dog and its owner move into this house, and creepy, spooky stuff starts happening, and you're only getting the information that the dog gets, and you're only kind of perceiving the story the way that the dog does up to a certain point. Now, this film does do something that I didn't expect, because all the marketing, all the promotional materials really push this as kind of, we're doing The Conjuring, or we're doing Insidious, or we're doing Paranormal Activity, and it's gonna unfold like one of those movies, but from the dog's perspective. And for the first maybe like 45 minutes to an hour of this film, that is more or less what this movie is. But there is something that happens in the last 15 to 20 minutes that kind of turns all that on its head, and you realize that the whole time, once again, you're perceiving the story the way that the dog is perceiving it. And a dog is not going to understand certain concepts that a human will. And this movie kind of plays with that. I won't give away the ending of the film, but I will say that for as many people, myself included, who were kind of like, I don't even know if I want to see this movie, it's a horror movie from the dog's perspective, that must surely mean that something horrible is going to happen to the dog. I won't go so far as to tell you whether or not the dog lives or dies, but I will say that ultimately it's not the dog that you need to really be worried about, if that makes any difference. It might sound weird, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. As far as what happens to the dog, there is a toll that is taken, but the dog is kind of not the primary subject for the horror in this film. As far as animal performances, this is really impressive. I mean, I just found out that they made this movie for like $750,000. Might sound like a lot to certain people, but that's a very low budget for a horror movie. The Black Phone 2, which I'll talk about next, cost something like $40 million to make. So just kind of use that as a comparison. They spent next to nothing to make this movie, and they shot it over well over a year, maybe even a couple of years. I'm not for sure, but I know that they took a really long time to make this movie because of how difficult it is to work with the dog, and the dog is, let's face it, the focus of the movie. That's incredibly admirable. I think even if this movie hadn't been as good as it was, I would still kind of admire it just because of that. It is really hard to talk about this one without giving away too much, so I think I'm just going to leave it at that. If you're like me and you're a dog person and you like the idea of a dog kind of being the center of a horror film, definitely check this out. It's worth your time. I think it's worth seeing in the theater, absolutely. Good Boy is going to get 3 stars. And now for the final review of this Roundup video. Black Phone 2. Black Phone 2 is obviously a sequel to The Black Phone from 2021. I really liked that film. I did. I didn't love everything about it, but it was high on my list at the time. I've seen it a few times by now, and I think that how you perceive that movie, I wouldn't recommend seeing this one without seeing the first one. This is a case of a sequel being a direct continuation after the events of the first film. But I think your level of enjoyment of the sequel is really going to depend on what you liked about the first movie. In this film, we get Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw as the brother and sister duo from the first movie returning, and they're a little older. This takes place a few years later. I think he's like 17 and she's like 14 or something like that. And she's having these visions like she does in the first movie, except that these seem to be happening at this youth camp out in the mountains, and she gets him to go along with her to this youth camp to try to figure out what the meaning is behind these visions, these dreams that she's having. And then, of course, lo and behold, the grabber, Ethan Hawke, the amazing antagonist from the first film, is back to wreak more havoc on these kids. Now, first, what I like about the movie. While I enjoyed the first film, I enjoyed it for what it was. And when I heard that they were going to make a sequel, I wasn't completely on board until I realized the direction they were going to take with this. The first film, they used the phone as a way for spirits to contact Mason Thames' character, Finney. And that's really the hook of the movie, is that they're going to kind of instruct him on how to get out of this dilemma, how to get out of the situation that he's in, and how to get away from the killer. And that worked really well for that movie. This seems like a logical continuation of that, except that now, on the other end of that phone, is the bad guy. A lot of people are going to compare this, and have already compared this, to Nightmare on Elm Street. I do completely get where they're coming from, but I don't think that this is ripping off that movie so much as it's taking the concept of a villain appearing in someone's dreams and causing harm to them. I think that this movie is utilizing that concept in a very different way. And I do think that it does narratively fit in with the events, what happened in the first movie. What I do have a problem with in this one is that you get very little of that. As soon as I found out and saw the trailer, and you get this concept, the grabber's back, and Ethan Hawke's back, but now he's this supernatural nightmare boogeyman, I thought, that's fantastic. I can't wait to see that. Guys, he's in 10 minutes of this movie. Just accumulated. He's in 10 minutes of this movie. I really wish there had been more of that stuff in this. What is there, though, is really good, really entertaining. Like VHS Halloween, which I just reviewed, this movie is not afraid to do some horrible things to children. But I think in this movie, it's done a little more tastefully. It's not as in your face. And it's... What's the best way to put this? It's done in a way that is meant for elevating the horror instead of just shock value. Ultimately, I liked Black Phone 2 about as much as I liked the first one, but for very different reasons. I am curious to see if they do a third one. I don't think they need to, but if they do, and the idea for a third movie is interesting enough, I'm sure I'll give it a chance. But for now, I'm pretty content with Black Phone and Black Phone 2 if they decide to just leave it at that. Black Phone 2 gets 3 stars. And with that, I'll go ahead and end this review roundup. I think I'm going to try this as long as this goes well and gets some views. I think this is something that I'm going to try to do, like I said, every couple of months or so, just to catch people up on my general feelings of new films that are coming out. I do have a handful of videos I'm going to do in the near future, one for Something Wicked This Way Comes, and one for Lair of the White Worm. So keep a lookout for those. Those will be coming soon. And thanks for watching. And stay tuned for more Priceless B movies.